day. Welcome to today's conversation. We endeavor to have a debate with various guests on national matters in a conversational, relaxed way, but it doesn't take away the seriousness of the issues. Today, I'm privileged to host Honorable George Chisanga. Many will remember him as Law Association of Zambia president between 2014 and 2016. But we'll delve into his life, his current roles. He's now currently a member of Parliament, and we'll go into the details. Honorable George Chisanga, welcome and Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you also, Ambassador Mwamba, and I'm so delighted to be given the opportunity to have a conversation with you.
You must have gone to the constituents. Are you back? Or you'll be going to the constituency?
I actually plan to go to the constituency on the 21st of January. I was overwhelmed. As you would recall, the major challenges we're having as Patriotic Front are basically challenges of the law. Yeah. And there are some cases that have been ongoing that I thought we should pay attention to and help our lawyers who are retained to handle this matter. But the plan I have is that I'm going to the constituency on the 21st and possibly return somewhere on the 4th before we open Parliament.
Okay.
Yes.
Honorable George Chisanga is a member of Parliament for Lukashya. And before we go into those details, Honorable, just tell me about yourself. People now see you in various roles. You are now a member of Parliament, member of the Patriotic Front,
That's
and
right.
You've had a very illustrious life.
Grateful. Thank you very much. I mean, very briefly, I'm a lawyer by profession. I trained both here at the University of Zambia and in England at the University of Cambridge, where I did a master's degree in business and commercial law. My working career started with basically practicing business and commercial law in some private law firm called D.H. Kemp and Company. Later, I joined the banking sector. I worked for Stanbic Bank. In fact, I was the one who set up the Stanbic Bank legal department here in Zambia. I also worked at Stanbic Africa on attachment from Stanbic Zambia. After that, I left and went and worked for the PTA Bank. It's called the Commercial Bank, but it's affectionately called the PTA
Based
Bank.
In Nairobi.
Based in Nairobi, yes, where we're basically working in the region of Commercial, providing financial services. After that, I basically left corporate world, as I called it, and came and set up my own
PTA
practice.
Bank,
Yes.
you know, it has played a key role to our country. Many people would not understand.
Yes.
For example, that especially when we're importing crude, they would usually pre-finance.
We used to do a document to finance pre-crude on about $90 million for
every shipment.
Every shipment, and it was resting for 90 days. But not only that, we also helped Zambia very much. You know, remember what Mr. Mwamba suffered the time of yellow maize, and GMOs. The time that Mr. Mwamba refused to accept GMOs, we initiated a trade finance transaction where we bought maize for the Zambian government for about $30 million, and were able to sustain the country, but also had enough in surplus. And the following year, of course, we supported the country in producing maize, and we went back to maize which is non-GMO under the MMD government. Yes.
PTA Bank is an initiative of COMESA, isn't it?
In fact, it's an initiative of COMESA, but you also want to know that the major consultant for the creation of PTA Bank was a Zambian. Dr. Mr. Wira Mwamba, the late, who was the first African Development Bank president when it was created, by the initiative of IMF and the World Bank. And after that, Kaunda, working with Shehu Shagari, found it with Moi, found it prudent to retain Mr. Wira Mwamba to be the major consultant for the creation of the PTA Bank, the way we know it. So we've got Zambians who have contributed not only in this nation, but even regionally as well. If you know Mr. Mwamba, he was one of the longest serving president of the African Development Bank. Which
many will know him from the Mwamba constitutional making reform, and they might not be aware that he was the first Zambian to be president of the African Development Bank.
Exactly, yes. So he's the one who basically was a consultant in the creation of the PTA Bank, of course, with others. It was a very illustrious bank, and it continues, I think, to be. I'm told now they've transformed it into the East and Central Africa Trade Bank. It's no longer a development bank anymore.
Yeah, they've expanded it.
Yes, they've expanded the product.
So were you based in Nairobi or you were based in Lusaka?
I was based in Nairobi for a period of 4.5 years. Wow. That's where the headquarters was. But
so masema Kiswahili?
Nimesema kidogo tu, kidogo.
Because 4 years in Nairobi, you must have learned some
We learned a lot of Kiswahili, yes. But the PTA Bank was supposed to be in Bujumbura, actually. That's where it is supposed to be stationed. but because
in Burundi.
In Burundi, yes.
Yeah, I think that's what the article says.
Absolutely.
But
yes.
It's by the instability, I think, issues of security.
They were responding to the instability and said, look, we need to get into a financial services institution supposed to be given, a semblance of an environment which is stable.
Yeah.
And the thinking of the sponsors then was that, look, we're going to maintain the headquarters in Bujumbura, but the trading institution is going to be located in Nairobi. In fact, in Nairobi, we didn't even have our own assets. We were renting everything, starting from the products themselves and the building that we were operating from. But in Bujumbura, there's a well-structured building that was constructed by COMESA, which is supposed to be house the PTA Bank.
So now I understand why you're fascinated by Kenyan politics.
Absolutely.
So it comes from the COMESA
it's a second country,
and from the PTA Bank.
In my assessment, really, it's a second country, because I think I went there also when they were going through some transformations.
Yeah.
If you remember, we as Zambia are the ones who pioneered transformation from one-party system to the multi-party system. The Kenyans may have called themselves multi-party, but it remained de facto a one-party state system until 2002, when we arrived. In fact, I was there when they were doing a transition, from Moi's legacy to the legacy that was then started by, Mwai Kibaki, and later on, Uhuru Kenyatta, and now our friend, the hustler, who's the president there.
Love is politics, but
That's
when you take power, something changes,
Absolutely,
and it seems to have various challenges.
Yes, right.
Tell me briefly your role at the Law Association of Zambia.
Well,
I think that was very instrumental.
Absolutely. In fact, I wanted to say earlier that I had been very instrumental in the politics. We call it the politics of the Law Association of Zambia, because to lead that profession, you're almost like one of the opposition political figures. So I had started engaging in LAS politics way back in 1997, when then President of LAS, George Kunda, invited me to join, as one of the junior counsel initiative, and we were the subcommittee basically for junior lawyers. If you remember what happened in 1997, that's about the time that UPND was formed. In fact, UPND was invited to come and make a presentation. Mr. Mazoka, then the president, came and gave a presentation. And I think that's when I was identified with LAS politics, because at that time...
at the Oasis Forum?
No, before the Oasis Forum. We had an AGM for the Law Association of Zambia, and we invited Mr. Mazoka for the new
as a guest of honor.
UPND as a guest of honor. And George Kunda found it prudent to ask me to move a vote of thanks to Mr. Mazoka's statement. And after that, I became a member of, a fixture of the subcommittees for LAS. Later, I got into council. When I left to go to Kenya, I was actually not serving on council, but I was serving on a subcommittee. I went to Kenya, and after 4 years, when I came back, I was again co-opted back into the council. I remained a council member from 2008 to 2012. In 2013, in fact, 2013, I transitioned into vice president of LAS. And in 2014, I was given the privilege of being the president of Law Association of Zambia, which I served for 2 years, between 2014 and 2016. And politically, if you notice again, we went through a transition as a nation at the time that I was president of LAS. That's why, unfortunately, we lost the Republican president, Mr. Sata, sitting in office then, and we had to deal with how do we transition power within the Patriotic Front.
I was partly involved with that matter, other than the role of campaigning for president.
That's right.
When there were challenges by, of the health of the head of state, of course you can't discuss the health of the president, head of state publicly.
That's right.
You usually are in secret meetings, in quiet meetings. And I used to tell them, the law provides that the vice president, Guy Scott, will act as president.
Exactly.
So everyone dismissed me.
That's right.
Everyone dismissed me because they said, no. Look, President Michael Sata has been very clear. This man can't act as president. Of course, because of his heritage. And he said, even morally himself would not submit himself to act as president. I said, the law is the law. In fact, the day that President, I can let you in, the day that President Michael Sata died, I was with President Lungu with few others, Mukwita and Kaiser Zulu. And we just saw the president, at the time he was acting president, Lungu, pacing outside. We didn't know what he was dealing with. But at midnight, he came and dismissed us. So we left. So when we left, the first call I got was from Lengasata, who told me, Emmanuel, that discussion we had about the president and who will act, the president has died. So I drove back. I was on Los Angeles Road. I drove back because I knew that we were going to have a crisis, a constitutional crisis.
And in fact, we had it. If you remember then what happened at that time, there was so much opinion about who really should act as president. And the Attorney General then, he found it prudent to ask the lower session of Zambia, to proffer an opinion about what this constitutional status.
And you were president at the time.
I was president at that time. I convened council and we sat and we deliberated on the matter. We consulted even state council, because what we try and do in LAS, we want to make sure that if we give an opinion, it won't be owned only by the president. It will be owned by the whole profession at that time. So we, after doing back and forth consultation, we authored an opinion to the president, to the acting president, actually, Dr. Edgar Lungu. And believe it or not, for me, I have respected this president for the longest time. But even the reaction that he gave to the opinion that we gave to Laz, for me, gave me the impression that we have got somebody who's got leadership qualities and who suits the profile of a president. Because I had expected, like others did, that there was going to be resistance.
Oh, serious
because
objection.
Several other political players within the Patriotic Front were saying, no, Mr. Sata had said you're going to be acting. So insofar as we're concerned, you're supposed to continue acting.
He showed leadership. One day when we write books,
that's right,
we will tell the story.
I said
but I remember
time,
that night that I drove back and we began to make phone calls. And within an hour we had gathered, I think there were about 20 or 21 ministers, and we had gathered about 11 ministers. And the question was exactly that.
Exactly.
So I think the security cluster called for an emergency meeting that the cabinet should be convened. And at 05:30, we all drove to State House. We didn't sleep, discussing various options and consulting. And we drove to State House, and the meeting was convened. Musa Mwenye was then Attorney General,
that's right,
was in Livingstone. The Secretary of Cabinet had to ensure that we waited for the opinion from Musa Mwenye. And he came and gave what we perceived was a hostile opinion.
That's right.
But it was firm. He said the person to act was Guy Scott.
That's right.
But the leadership from President Lungu is exactly what you're talking about.
For me, that's exactly.
He didn't resist. No. Even when his colleagues said, look, we have powers amongst ourselves to make an acting president. He refused. He says, if the law says Guy Scott, let him be.
That's right.
And we, members across the country, PF members, were deflated because of the political dynamics. So I'm glad that you played a key role in that.
I had a conversation with him. He called and said, look, we've got your opinion. And he said, in authoring this opinion, have you considered the ramifications of the decision that you are asking us to make? I said to him, sir, I'm a lawyer where I'm sitting. I didn't have to consider the other ramifications. For me, the responsibility was basically to interpret the constitutional imperative that requires for what to do. And he says, Mr. Chisanga, I'm a lawyer, I respect your opinion. We will act according to what you've guided us. And if you noticed, yes, the members of Patriotic Front inside, were deflated. But in the joking way, I said to the president, sir, I don't think you have to give it a worry. I think that the deceased president has already pointed the nation to where he would like us to go.
We should succeed.
This is just a process that we can take. Allow the Constitution to be respected. In fact, for me, if you demonstrated that, you are going to gain respect from the public, because then you'll be shown to be a person who wants to respect the spirit and the letter of the Constitution. And we just joked about it and said, oh, never mind, you've advised.
So it was under you and under President Lungu that we had this new constitution ushered in.
The 2016 constitution,
From 2006, there was no consensus on constitutional making process.
In fact, from 1971.
From 1971
you can trace in the nation.
So for the first time, we had an amendment of for various reasons. We couldn't amend the entire constitution because of Part 3 of the constitution that requires that it should be approved by referendum. But a new constitution was birthed while you were last president. Just discuss that. How come the forces seems to have aligned and the president, stakeholders, and we had that amendment from Parliament. The UPN didn't really object to it, and it came to pass.
For me, what had been lacking, I think, for the longest period in the nation was the need to provide objective leadership to the constitutional making process, in the nation. If you see the experiences we've had with all the constitutional review programs we've managed as a nation, they have always been interfered with politically. And our case under Patriotic Front was not an exception, because we started this process with Mr. Sata in office. In fact, for us, we had etched into the Constitution, into our manifesto rather, a program that we're going to undertake to amend the constitution of Zambia. In sitting, I was one of the lawyers who were advising from a legal perspective with Simbia Kula, Dr. Mulwira, and others when Winter was Secretary General of the party. We had agreed that how we're going to, amend the constitution was not to have another CRC. There was no need for it because we had collected so much literature about this constitution. So we said we were going to create an expert, a body of experts.
Mainza Chona in 1971. Yes. Patrick Mvunga in 1990. Then 1996, Mwanakatwe, John Mwanakatwe.
That's right.
Then Mwamba in two.
Yes. And so there was so
material
much literature.
And
it's not an easy and cheap assignment to do a CRC. So we then said, look, we're going to just collect all this information and create a document that people are going to speak to.
Because the views with Zambians have not necessarily changed, even on controversial issues.
They've been consistent. And that's why I'm saying making a constitution at this time in this country is become very easy because we've got all the material. And people have said the same thing from the beginning up to the time that the PF now was mandated to pass a constitution. Now, unfortunately, under Mr. Sata, we had again political interference. If you saw what happened, the interest groups within Patriotic Front, made sure they scattered the process. Even at the time, we were almost done with it. So when Dr. Lungu was campaigning with you in 2015, he also said, look, I am going to ensure that under my watch, I will pass this constitution.
This new constitution, yes.
Of course, this constitution in a draft form, it had so many controversial provisions. And in providing leadership to it, after I was elected, he decided to ensure that we collect what can never be controversial, but also what is very important to maintain peace in the nation, but also to instill discipline in political leadership in the nation. That is what was a driving force between 2015 and 2016. The Law Association of Zambia collected that document, and we subjected to examination by various professionals within the profession. And we agreed that what was going to come in 2016 was possibly an 80% compromise of what we were looking for in the constitutional process that we started as a Patriotic Front. Now, under the leadership of Dr. Edgar Lungu, we then passed the Act number 2 of 2016. And in my assessment of constitutionalism, if we hadn't done what we did in 2016, right now this country would have been in chaos. Most of what we are preventing ourselves from doing is because we are imprisoned by this constitution.
What were some of the key features in this new constitution?
Some of the key features were basically, how to transition the presidency, the most important. If the president dies in office, what do we do? Because we saw the problems that we had with Mr. Mwanawasa coming to RB, with Mr. Sata coming to Dr. Lungu himself. So the thinking was that we needed to avoid that mischief.
Instability during that period.
Absolutely, and we succeeded in doing it. Okay, there were also other issues concerning,
but there were things like fixed calendar for elections. Zambians know when they will go to elections. It's no longer an executive issue.
Even that also was a plus for somebody who was reading the constitutional making process. And also the number of cabinet, the reduced cabinet. And several other provisions that are contained in this constitution.
So we even forget about the deputy ministers, that there used to be deputy ministers.
That's what I'm saying. So that's a reduced number
of regarded as an unnecessary cost.
So for me, I think Mr. Lungu was very firm, especially because he was driving the process when he was in State House. Any president sitting in State House would not want to pass a constitution that has a potential.
Was going to harm him.
Yes, that has a potential of harming him. For me, it is a clear demonstration of selfless leadership that somebody is able to actually do that. And he did it and it passed.
So 3 years later,
yes,
butane arose.
Exactly.
Butane was like an afterthought.
Yes.
Look, this constitution looks like a runaway train.
That's right.
There are many issues, many lacunas. So I think government proposed that there should be amendments to certain rights.
Yes.
But others oppose that allow the constitution to be tested.
That's right.
Why in a hurry to amend the constitution that is basically new? What was the thinking around butane?
Also consistent with what Mr. Lungu had said when passing Act number 2 of 2016, he declared at Heroes that, look, this is almost like a half-baked cake. I know there are going to be some issues that are going to arise when we begin to implement this constitution. So we must remain open-minded to address several other issues that might come to the fore. In fact, at that time, what the country had become busy with was now the Public Order Act and the Access to Information Bill. And those bills were in an advanced stage. They were actually on the floor of the House when they were being discussed. The UPND then decided that, no, we have to suspend Access to Information Bill, we have to suspend the Public Order Act, we have to address the elephant in the room, which is the constitution. For them, there were some lacunas that were in that constitution that needed to be dealt with. And in ensuring that there was, wider stakeholder consultation, there was a demand that CSOs participate, the church participates, but driven by political parties. And that was a lock-in arrangement between the Patriotic Front, and the UPND. But there's also an initiative that Zambians may not have known. There were also experts that were appointed to draft the Bill 10. But it was a negotiated document between the Patriotic Front and the UPND.
Why did it fail?
There was agreement. It's politics. Once you infuse politics in a constitutional making process, Ambassador, you have actually lost the way. The UPND was playing double standards. Okay? In sitting on the table with the Patriotic Front at Siavonga, there were all these discussions. In sitting with the Patriotic Front at Intercontinental Hotel, there were all these agreements.
Yeah.
There was even a portion of it where the UPND on its own went and consulted the church regarding Bill 10. The Patriotic Front on its own went and consulted the church on Bill 10. And the church was agreed that, look, there's consensus here. This document is a fantastic document. But when the UPND came to date the public, they started raising now the little issues that they had with Bill 10, saying, look, this is the PF trying to, extend its stay in power, trying to ensure that they bring in clauses that are controversial, but which are very helpful to them. So they whipped public opinion against the government and against the Bill 10 itself. And then, of course, if you recollect, there were many UPND MPs who supported Bill 10.
Yes.
They were prepared to come to the House and vote in support of Bill 10. They were hijacked. The time we were now considering Bill 10 in the House, even those who had offered to come and support it had been hijacked and taken to President Hakainde as community house, and that's how Bill 10 failed. But I have challenged them. You see, the misfortune with a good document is that you can make it look dirty, but you need it in future. I have actually said that with whatever UPND is going to do now, as long as what they're going to do is not going to reach the threshold of Bill 10, they will not be successful in passing any constitutional amendments. And the procedure they're trying to use now to engage in amending the Constitution is rather unconstitutional.
UPND said we didn't need Bill 10. In fact, the Constitution was a good document. We needed to allow it to be tested. So it was very surprising as soon as President Hakainde Hichilema won elections and appointed your young brother Mulambe Haimbe as Justice Minister. His first pronouncement was that we're going to clean up the Constitution. We're going to effect constitutional amendments.
The same document they were saying.
So it raised the issue of hypocrisy. Colleagues, you rejected Bill 10. Now, Chua Milagalo, Kuluma Imbwa. But now how are you allowing, why do you want to amend the Constitution?
And then, you see, of course, you hear what they're suggesting, the so-called low-hanging fruits, etc. For me, when you begin to talk about an important document like the Constitution, and you begin to suggest things like low-hanging fruits, it means you don't have good intentions. Good intentions means go to the people. Let the people tell you what they want. But like I said, the literature that we are sitting with in this country to effect any constitutional amendment is so rich that you don't even have to distinguish between what is a low-hanging fruit and what is not a low-hanging fruit. For me, I've challenged the UPND, and I can repeat it even here. I've said the best way for the UPND to pass, to amend, to deal with the lacunas that exist in Act Number 2 of 2016 today is for my younger brother, Honorable Mwamba, to just go to the closet at his ministry, collect Bill 10 from the shelf, dust it, and begin to engage
build consensus.
Yes, begin to engage with us.
They don't need to reinvent the wheel.
No, this is a document that we did together. We had agreed with it. Okay, we may have one or two clauses that we need to, and if those clauses are very convincing, we will say, look, I even said it, look, I don't think I can fail to convince the Patriotic Front as its chair of legal on a document that themselves have originated to come and dispute it today. If it is amending 1-3 clauses, we will definitely tell them, I think this can be done. But you see, for me, what I intend, what I would like them to do is to demonstrate good faith. Unfortunately, the UPND, in their relationship with the Patriotic Front, have demonstrated bad faith at any angle of the engagement, be it formal engagement, be it informal engagement.
No, the history, even in 2010, they scattered the very well-planned constitutional amendments in 2010 that had gained maximum attention, and they just said it was an Arabic document, and it was rejected on the floor. At the last
2001, we were with them in the coalition. We were trying to make a coalition of opposition political parties who were working very hard, around the clock, trying to come up with the collision of opposition political parties to field one candidate. They scattered it. 90% of work had been done, and we were about to announce a big collision of opposition political parties when somebody surfaced with a parallel that they were working with, which wanted to pit the UPND ahead of everybody else. And that is what actually led to the loss of
So can they be trusted by stakeholders?
My question
like
is
I said, Chwamila, Galu, Kuluma Mbuzi, I'd said Kuluma Imbwa, Kuluma Mbuzi.
Yeah. Look, my question exactly. And see, they know how to create an environment where mistrust will thrive. Look at how they've been handling the issue of the Patriotic Front. How they've been sponsoring, individuals to come and basically rob the leadership of Patriotic Front.
So before we come to PF, walk us how you left LAS and now you're in Parliament.
Look, you may be interested to note that in 2001, actually I joined Emmanuel Mwamba. I joined him in 2000 as National Citizens Coalition, as his chair for legal affairs. And, we ran around with him. We participated in the election of 2001. Unfortunately, our
he came up with a good idea where he said Christians are missing in elections. There's no integrity. And he says the debt, the soil, the lack of integrity in politics because Christians are missing. It was a good idea.
Yes.
In fact, many Christians rallied with him.
Yes, and I can vouch for you that for me, as George Chisanga, I think I've remained consistent with that position because I think that is really what is lacking in politics of this nation. Integrity, good intent, leadership that is birthed in objectivity. We need to have impeccable individuals at the forefront of political leadership. And that's what we have wanted to do. And unfortunately, our performance in 2001, like we'd expect of a new political party, was dismal. Yeah. But with demonstration of good intentions, President Mwanawasa identified Dr. Nevas Mwamba and said, I can work with this man as my vice president.
Because of the values he promoted at the time. The values he
propagated during the campaigns. We went around the country preaching the same thing. And I think Mwanawasa heard from stakeholders that, look, that message, it resonates very well with who you would like to be as president.
Because we need to clean up the politics.
Absolutely. And he brought him in, unfortunately for me, that's when I started thinking my destination was different. Because I remember at that time beginning to engage with Dr. Mwamba on email, because then I was in Nairobi. I started saying, look, I think we need to go the route that Patriotic Front is going. We need to identify a political party that is a mass movement. We need to identify a political party that wants
people
to look
buy
at
into our values.
Yes, plight of the poor must be in the forefront of what we would like to achieve. Yes, PF just started like a story of more money in your pocket, but over time it galvanized opinion that showed that there's a big divide between the rich and the poor in this country. And if you go in that direction, you are actually creating chaos for the nation in future. What you need to do is to get into a political program that reduces the gap between the rich and the poor. And for me, PF presented such an opportunity. And I started telling my colleague Nevas, look, this is, I think, the route to go. We exchanged emails and everything. But later I discovered that having been identified by Mr. Mwanawasa, and Mr. Mwanawasa, by the way, for me, he knew me personally. So he used to speak to me as well, saying, look, bring him over, would like to get into. I came back from Nairobi, actually I took leave to come and sit with them, and we structured that, it wasn't even a merger. Mwanawasa simply said, look, just go and close your political party and come here and join us. And so we worked it out, and then Mr. Mwamba definitely joined. But for me, I had already started identifying myself with the Patriotic Front. So when I came back in 2005, for me, the easier journey was now to start with the Patriotic Front. And that's how I then went into LAS. And in 2011, actually, Mr. Sata had identified me as one of the contestants. And he told me you can begin to introduce yourself, into the constituency, in Lukashya constituency. So I applied to contest in Lukashya.
You were well known in places like Lusaka Central. Why did you choose?
Not even Lusaka Central. I was actually well known in Matero constituency.
Yes,
Matero
in Matero,
is the one that I had even contested in. But you see, the dynamics of politics is such that your absence from an area, it does cost you if you come back later. I contested in 2001 in Matero. Coming back in 2006, so much time had passed.
Yes.
And my colleague, Mayo Samparada, had already started being introduced into Matero. In fact, in Matero, the people wanted me to contest in 2006. This thing you're talking about came to see me at my office and told me, sir,
Then
I said, no, I've just introduced myself kuri Basata, and I wouldn't want to think that I should be so
supplanting anyone.
But also I'd already started thinking about Lukashya, because my family in Lukashya has been quite political. So my uncles, my father's brothers started telling me, look, there's so much work that you can do here. There's quite some amount of backwardness in terms of political leadership. We would like it to
and
be
also development.
And development especially. So I'd already now started, 2006, I started putting myself in place, with the assistance, of course. Winter was very helpful, I must say. With Winter and Vasata, I started going to Lukashya, talking to the people, telling them basically where I come from, because that's where I come from originally. So it was easy for them to identify. But in 2011, I ought to have contested, but there was now a wholesale decision by the Patriotic Front Central Committee that in every constituency where there's a sitting member of parliament, we're not going to introduce a new member of parliament. In fact, for me, I was charged by Basata personally to go back and be the campaign
manager
for
Frida Consent.
So I told him, no, I can't be a campaign manager, but I would like to be in the team, that then, because at that time, GBM had almost superimposed himself on the three constituencies, Kasama Central, Lukashya itself, and Malole. And he was running the process. So I just went and joined him. And we worked very hard, and we delivered for
the 3 seats.
By that time, yes. Now, as it happens with winning political power, when we won political power, of course, there was now pressure, on how to create a government leadership positions by the Omaiko Sata. There were a few positions that were floated, and of course, other people spoke about negatively about them, as you would know in politics. So I was unable to get a single position within the Patriotic Front. And after waiting until about 2012, I said to them, look, I'm a professional. I've got something to do. I can't just sit home waiting for an appointment if, in fact, it's not even looking possible that it's going to come. There was something that happened, which, of course, I would have elected to keep confidential. That made me feel...
conversation,
No. They're still, you'd like to keep to yourself. But I the engagements. I spoke to everybody, including Wasata himself. I went and told him, sir, look, I need to do some work. So I went back now to Laz, enlisted myself, and Laz was a very welcoming institution because I had already started my politics, like I said, with them. So it is easier for me to get back into council and subsequently in the second year, get into the vice presidency, and in 2014 take the presidency. And that's how I transitioned back into Laz politics, provided leadership. 2016, I again started speaking to the leadership in Patriotic Front because we were going to elections. I hadn't managed to engage the Republican president because if you remember also, my presidency in Laz was rather quite controversial of the PF.
Yeah, and because there were many things that were happening, and in fact, people saw Laz as opposing government.
Yes, the reason is simple.
Yet the leader yourself was deemed as a PF member.
And that's why I was almost lynched more than 4 times. The only time they would let me off, they would say, but he's a member of the party. But you see, there was agitation from within the Patriotic Front. They thought that I was very critical of the presidency. But between me and Dr. Lungu, there was
good governance issues were raised.
Clear understanding. There were phone calls that used to come, and then the others even used to agree, saying, "Oh, what you're doing is right. I think I'm going to act with it." Of course, where he disagreed with me, he would tell me, but President, I think this is wrong. You are doing too much politics. You are a professional. So we always had those arrangements. So in 2016, handing over the presidency, I felt, look, let me engage my principal and tell him that I am now back to the fort because I was already beginning again to look for Lukashya constituency itself. Of course, at that time, not aggressively because I thought I was going to start now working to prepare for 2021. Okay, and in the engagement that we had, I was actually given...
Because we had lost a seat to an independent.
Yes, but before you lost a seat to an independent, I was actually given a certificate of adoption, at State House at about 22 hours because there was so much agitation. The people from Lukashya actually came to Lusaka saying, why are you denying Mr. Chisanga from standing? You had assured us in 2011 that he was going to come in 2016.
And he gave it up.
Yes, and he ended it up. So I was then given that position. Of course, a few things happened the following day. My younger brother, Kevin Sampa, is the one who even carried my certificate of adoption, went ahead of me and told everybody he's coming. But again, as soldiers, when you're given an instruction, you stand down. So the following day, again, I was told...
Because as consideration, I think your dear sister, Frida Kansembe was senior, she was a member of the Central Committee,
yes, but also
and maybe those considerations, despite her weakness.
Yes, but also the need for women representation.
And women, yes,
I think
gender.
We had adopted very few women in 2016. And for me, look, leadership, you can provide it at any angle. And I'd already started working with President Lungu, even if I wasn't in cabinet. I mean, I was a ready consultant when if it came to dealing with issues of, constitutional matters, legal matters. So I was already providing leadership. So it didn't pain me that they withdrew me. And as misfortune would have it, again, we lost it to an independent who, again, unfortunately, who is a colleague of mine. I knew him very, very well. Yeah. Unfortunately, when he passed, I was then...
Due to COVID.
Due to COVID, yes. I was then told, no, look, it's not like...
You've waited for over 10 years.
You're not stealing this opportunity. We are going to give it to you. We think that you can provide proper leadership. And then I'm available. In 2020, you noticed we went to elections and we won by a landslide. 2021, again, Lukashya constituency, we've won it by a landslide. So this is how we're providing.
I feel for you. Lukashya is a very difficult constituency.
Complex. Very complex. But
how are you managing the dynamics?
They're also very accommodating people. I think they do understand. They've seen that, the challenges that have come with being in the opposition. Yeah. Look, we had, I think, delivered sufficient, even if the time that I was the MP, when the government was short, I demanded, of the president that this constituency is very poor. We need to bridge the gap. And I was supported very heavily in trying to do most of the work that we did. So they understood that, and its credit goes to Dr. Lungu. I think he provided proper leadership. He had seen how much deficiency there was when it came to campaign, and he gave me all the support that I needed, and all the line ministers that I was working with, Minister of Health, Home Affairs, and others that were basically assisting, and we worked very well. Coming into the opposition, of course, people understand where we are. I don't have the responsibility to drive the process of development now. Mine is to keep the government in checks and balances. Yeah. But even with what we have done, our CDF program has worked very, very well, because,
have you utilized it?
We have utilized it. In fact, I was very surprised last, I think 2 weeks ago, there was that purported,
the assessment of the burning rate.
Suggesting, yes. That,
I want an economist to come and discuss what burning rate
was very low.
Poor, yeah.
I got surprised because I superintend a very effective CDF committee. The way we selected, it was very deliberate. We've got people that are well versed in areas of development, because we know that a bigger proportion of what is given to constituencies for utilization is development.
No, in fact, the burn rate is very simple. People that bought equipment,
yes,
the burning rate went higher. But it doesn't mean for you that have engaged in building schools or building health centers or roads. Et cetera. You know how construction is.
I know.
They have to invest money.
Yes.
Certificate has to come.
Absolutely.
Then that's the only time that money is...
You get the next level.
So there might appear like there is slow burning rate when you actually have a lot of infrastructure project underway.
But you must understand it also from a perspective of politics. You see, the UPND, unfortunately, has converted the CDF into a political tool.
Yeah, it's been weaponized.
To decampaign the MPs who are from the opposition. For me, if you go to Lukashya, if there's one thing that I expect people are going to respect me for, it is how you utilize CDF. I have taken it away from politics. I've insisted that we must use people that are professional. The ones I'm chasing up are people that I know came there because of political compromise. And I'm demanding that, we can't continue operating like this.
And also the burn rate is related to the capacity of the councils.
Absolutely.
Because if your committee approves,
and the
there's nothing you can do. The implementation is by the local authorities.
So if you don't have technocrats who can actually do that work.
And the frustration, like you said, they can frustrate the process of implementation.
It's all multifaceted. But like I said, the bigger problem is that it's been politicized. And we try to do as much as we can. And beyond that, for me personally, I've identified other stakeholders that I work with to do work away from CDF. We've constructed a handful of community schools, in areas where even CDF does not penetrate. And it has worked very well. I've got an NGO called Scholarship International. They've helped us so much. We are putting up, if it's not 1 by 2, we're putting up a 1 by 3. And most of the places who have done that work, we've done a 1 by 3.
Areas.
Yeah, and what they've told me is just contribute a small portion of the money and I mobilize it on my own. Go and get a community together, we begin to do the work. Once I see we're starting to do the work, they give us more resources and we build school infrastructure. I hope I can find an equally positioned NGO that can help me now to deliver health infrastructure. Because what is missing in Lukashya mainly has been academic infrastructure, but also health facilities. We still have places where people bring their children under a tree to come and do under 5. And when you hear people talking about, the CDF is going to deliver this, it can't do all those things.
No. Central government still has a big role to play.
But also NGOs that can come on board and help will have a bigger role to help, stem the deficiencies that we have in the constitution, in the constituency. But we try as much as possible.
Honorable George Sanga, I think now we come to the issue of the Patriotic Front. The recent attacks we've seen from State House and from the state on the Patriotic Front, it is now agreed by all stakeholders that this is an attack on democracy, this is an attack on the Patriotic Front. And this matter regarding our brother who was suspended at the time, Mao Sampa, is not an internal matter, but appears a sponsored activity against the Patriotic Front. I recognize you are chairperson of the legal committee in the Patriotic Front. Without really offending matters in court, because these matters are sub judice, please just give a background of the cases that are in court, what it is that you are fighting, and is there hope to restore the Patriotic Front to its rightful current leadership?
That's right. Well, thank you very much. I mean, the first thing we have to recognize is that from the time that we lost power, our colleagues in the UPND have engaged in a spirited attempt to destroy the Patriotic Front. And they're using every means available at their disposal to do exactly that.
What did they start with? What do you mean spirited attack?
The first thing they did was to challenge all our seats in Parliament with the intention that they could get nullifications. I think they had wrongly thought that because they'd taken power, they had taken control at that time of government, of public institutions.
So nearly all PFMPs, council chairpersons, mayors were challenged in court.
Challenged in court. There were more than 256 petitions.
Unprecedented.
Yes, involving councillors, council chairpersons and mayors. There were about 58 petitions involving members of parliament. And when, it came to light that some of the petitions were not going to be successful, they started dropping a number of them. But the majority of them remained in court. Our legal team, of course, stood up to the challenge, represented members of parliament, and we managed to get most of the seats, returned except only 2.
So these attacks accusing the UPND of trying to create a de facto one-party state started immediately. Imagine if they had succeeded with all those petitions.
The first resolution they passed for themselves that they shouldn't be Patriotic Front come 2022 December. There was not going to be a political party. Wow. And every effort they put in was to ensure that they decimate you, they remove you from existence, because they know the only formidable opposition they've got in this country is the Patriotic Front for various reasons. Firstly, the PF is the biggest political party in the country. People would like to describe it as the biggest opposition party. No, that is just half a description. We are actually the biggest political party in the country in terms of structures, in terms of membership, even in terms of representation in the communities. So that if you are in government and you see that this is a threat you have, you then use every means available at your disposal to make sure you destroy that. So that phase ended. It was very unsuccessful. Because like I said,
very aggressive.
Very aggressive, but very unsuccessful. And partly it resulted in the reduction in the morale of the membership of the Patriotic Front.
I remember there were 9 seats that you lost at, is it at High Court level?
At High Court level, yes.
And the Speaker proceeded to declare those seats vacant and remove the MPs in Parliament.
That also opened us up to a realization that this was a connivance between the UPND in government and the presiding officers at Parliament, because the Speaker went against existing precedent, which says if a member of Parliament is being challenged, in court, his seat is being challenged for nullification via petition, as long as the matter has not been resolved by the Constitutional Court, finally, that MP must retain the seat at Manda Hill. and he must remain in parliament, or she must remain in parliament and participate in the processes. But the speaker, against that existing precedent, and the speaker being a renowned lawyer herself, decided to pass a blind eye to the existing precedent and kicked those members of parliament out of parliament. One time during Vice President's question, the Vice President, even cheered up the Speaker for having made such a decision.
Oh my!
I challenged her myself. I said, look, I am a lawyer, and I've got faith in the judicial system in the country, but also I know that what has happened is wrong. But I assured the Vice President that our colleagues who have been unceremoniously kicked out of Parliament will come back, because the evidence that we have examined shows clearly that those nullifications were actually not justified. And true to what I predicted, those people came back, except the two, Honorable Malanji and Honorable Lusambo. So that project, as aggressive as it wasn't successful. PF still remained intact, and we continued providing checks and balances.
Your brother, John Sangwa, says we've seen ruling parties steal resources, steal money, but it's the first time that we've seen a ruling party steal seats.
Leadership, yes.
So the issue of Honorable Malanji and Bowman Lusambo,
right.
just speak to that briefly, because I think that was a test to what is currently happening.
It was basically theft of those seats. But let me tell you what I have always said. I've paid glowing tribute to our legal team that represented us under the most difficulty of circumstances. And we got to a stage where a message has been delivered. Right now, the Constitutional Court is sitting. The Malanji and the Lusambo case is not, nobody should be getting excited that it's finished. It's still ongoing business. There's a matter before the Constitutional Court where our lawyers are simply asking them to repeat what they had said earlier on, because they themselves had made a decision that these individuals were eligible to stand.
And they were unfairly excluded,
of course,
and constitutionally excluded.
By connivance between the ECZ and State House. Because if you notice what was happening during the period, is that even when the matters were in court, the president found himself going to, to the constituencies.
He engaged
every
in
week.
A 10-day campaign.
Yes, every week he was there. One time he declared a 10-day campaign period on the Copper Belt, even when the matters were in court. And our lawyers raised all these issues before the court. But what was exciting is that court at that time found that those people were not prevented from participating in the election. But ECZ, like we said, has managed to put them out of the ballot box, ballot paper. They didn't participate. That matter is in court. I don't know what the Constitutional Court is going to say. I have the expectation, that courts are guided by what is called established judicial precedent. The court has already pronounced itself on this matter. The most they're going to try and do is repeat what they had said. And if that
there's an absurd case against Zambia's sixth president, where various petitioners have gone to court and they want to challenge the Constitutional Court by alleging that former President Edgar Lungu was not eligible to stand in 2021. Yet there have been, I think, two pronouncements by the Constitutional Court.
There's been so much controversy surrounding that case, and most of it, quite frankly, is political, and most of it, unfortunately, is ethnical. Sometimes we need to get to a stage as a nation where we begin to address the vices that we are faced, head on, and establish what are we trying to achieve. Courts are supposed to help us achieve what is called social order. When courts make pronouncements, our responsibility is to actually respect those pronouncements.
So are they part of national building? Are they part of keeping peace in this country?
They are now, we are going through a litmus test of whether our courts are really part of a national building and national unity. Because you see, their responsibility is one of arbiters. It is expected in a multi-party political system that we are going to have differences in terms of interpretation of the law, in terms of interpretation of the Constitution. I appeared before a select committee before I became a member of Parliament when I was president of LAS, and I reminded members of Parliament that we are about to pass a constitution that will create a class of very few individuals who will be telling us what is democratically constitutional or what is not. When we were appointing those judges in the Constitutional Court, I was telling the members of Parliament, we are now surrendering our sovereignty to the Constitutional Court. Yes. They are the ones who are going to be there. And I told them, let's pick individuals of impeccable reputation, of impeccable character, because this responsibility is going to be an interpretation of this document we say is our Constitution. Of course, the judges were appointed, and as a lawyer and as a citizen, I have a responsibility of according due respect to these judges. Whether or not they're going to discharge that function remains for the court of public opinion to interpret.
But the trouble with that court is it's a court of first and last appearance.
Yes.
In most cases.
And it should be so, except that with now the development of jurisprudence elsewhere, they have been made subject to an appeal process in other countries. And I think the idea is being mooted even here, that maybe it must be done. But look, let's deal with what we have right now. What I believe myself is that every human being has got what is called a spiritual determination. You know, if I say, Mr. Mwamba, you are now the judge of the court, you immediately have to remind yourself, what am I accountable to? And if you want to understand your level of accountability, read the document by which you have been elected. It's not the first time we are having a court that has to make decisions that are so controversial because we are developing our new, constitutional jurisprudence. In America, there's a very celebrated case of Marbury and Madison. I think lawyers understand that, where judges who were appointed by commissions, exercising the powers of the president, challenged their own appointment and made a finding in court that we are the ones who benefited from these commissions of appointing us as federal Supreme Courts, judges, but the commissions were unconstitutionally exercised. So they actually fired themselves. But the quest is they wanted to test the Constitution. So for me, these judges must just read the Constitution, find out what is their responsibility under the Constitution regarding the cases that have come to court. There are several cases that have come before them now.
Yeah, speak to briefly to the issues of MAOs, where you suspect illegalities and where the party is, and in relation to our democracy.
For me, you can't divorce discussing MAOs from politics, but I'll try and discuss it from a strict legal perspective. You see, we have argued, and our lawyers have taken these cases to court with a principal argument that under the PF Constitution, just like under any other political party's constitution, including the UPND constitution, there are laid down procedures. There are yardsticks that are laid down. There are certain thresholds that are laid down within the constitutional framework of that political party called Patriotic Front that everybody has to comply with for you to have what is called an effective and successful convention. They are, structures where there's maximum participation at all senior levels in the political party. Members of parliament must be part of a convention. Members of Central Committee must be part of convention. There's what is called the National Council, which is basically the sieve for that institution and for that process. And that National Council is provided for in the Constitution. So what our lawyers have simply said, look, let's examine what went to Miles Sampa's convention to establish whether the threshold that is provided for in the Constitution was met. And that is important because it is only when you prove that when you want to now go and register the so-called office bearers, the registrar of society will gauge what you did against what is contained in the Constitution. And that document is sitting with her. Those are the powers that are vested in our office by the Registrar of Societies Act or the Societies Act. Unfortunately, this issue is what the court is vacillating in dealing with. In my assessment, this is a very simple issue that, quite frankly, a judge who is sufficiently experienced, properly qualified, and one who applies the law and nothing else should have dealt with within a period of not more than 90 days.
In November, the Zambia Conference of Catholic Bishops issued what they call a pastoral letter. This is a rare letter that I think they issue maybe 3-4 times a year.
That's right, yes.
And among the issues they raised was the shrinking democratic space. And the case of the Patriotic Front was very prominent. And they made a special appeal to the Chief Justice to ensure that where disputes are in political parties that even threaten democracy, those disputes must be resolved and resolved quickly.
Expeditiously.
Other stakeholders, OSIDA, and other church leadership and other stakeholders, they've also called on the judiciary and the Chief Justice to ensure that he's responsive to this national crisis we have. It's no longer deemed as a PF crisis.
That's right. In Bemba we say, when stakeholders begin to raise issues concerning the delivery of justice, it simply means there's a big problem. You see, in fact, if you saw the pastoral letter, there was even a suggestion in the pastoral letter that they had expected that the Chief Justice, who has powers to sit as a puisne judge, should have possibly considered taking up that matter and coming to the High Court and calling the lawyer and say, look, I'm going to hear this case as a puisne judge. Why? Because we needed to create a standard. There are problems with what transpired at Miles Sampa's conference, which, if allowed to become part of our legal system, is going to create chaos. So that challenge was big enough for the Chief Justice to be able to get off from his seat as Chief Justice and come and sit as a puisne judge, so that we could have a proper interpretation of how should a political party follow its constitutional provisions when it comes to hosting and holding a national conference. I was the first one to make that call to the Chief Justice earlier on, because I noticed...
You recognize the sensitivity of this matter.
And this is not to spite the judge who was hearing this case. My personal assessment as a lawyer of 30 years standing, it was that this case is too big for that judge. It is only that people don't pay attention to the real issues. It is too big because there is what looks like influence from elsewhere on that case. There's a dark cloud, hovering around that case. And that judge, having just freshly been appointed, in my assessment, should not have been given that case in the first place. And if the Chief Justice recognizes this as a problem, he should have decided himself, exercising the constitutional powers that he's got, to come and sit as the judge of the High Court. In fact, in the recent past, the Chief Justice recognizes this problem. Because there was a story, I think I was out of town when I read in the press, that he had called a meeting of judges to come and discuss why the Patriotic Front cases are delaying now. That shows you how problematic this issue has become. And in my assessment, I think...
The UPND have been very adamant that this is an internal problem. The PF, have accused literally State House and the state as orchestrating this process against the Patriotic Front. Just speak to that. Why do you make those strong allegations?
First I made a comment once. I said, look, it's only a small child of 7 years who, if he walks out of a bedroom with sugar on his mouth and you ask him, "No, little sugar," and you say no. But you can actually see that he's got sugar on his mouth.
They have sugar on their mouth.
The genesis of this thing was what the president said. He himself declared that twalaingira nomba stage ya mingalato. Nga twamala timingalato tashire bomba tukapiribuka twesebe katapa mukoshi. Like he's designed a scheme which becomes dangerous if the first stage does not succeed. So the first stage did not succeed. Petition did not succeed. And then other things,
not allow
it didn't work. Yes, arrest of our senior leaders in the party is yet to succeed, or if it is going to succeed, because now what you've seen is it's like now they arrest you, then they create offenses, and then they create courts, and then they bring you to the court. This process is very strange. It's never been heard of anywhere that you arrest people and you create now a properly structured courts that come to deal with those people. What is happening to the presumption of innocence? What is happening to the need for you to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt in accordance with the golden rules that we've been applying for over 100 years? What is so special about the Patriotic Front? But this tells you that these are all schemes intended to ensure that by the set period in the stages of Mingalato, this political party ceases to exist. So now we are at a stage where they are using one of our own, our kith and kin, to design him as an alternative, leadership within the Patriotic Front. They actually help him to stage a coup d'etat against an existing political party. But I've said this, I have the confidence of the fact that PF is a strong organization. It is it's not an ordinary political party. This is a living organism. This thing has transitioned. But also the agenda of the PF is an agenda that Zambians will forever assimilate to. A political party that says we want to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor has the poor as its friends. And the poor are in the majority in the nation. So if you are going to toil with a political party like this one, you are actually...
Delineating yourself from the people.
From the poor. So there's whatever they're going to put in place is not going to work. But coming to the court cases that are, before the court, the only thing our lawyers have been asking is for the court to determine whether what transpired at Emmanuel Mwampa's retreat
was legal,
is
legitimate.
Anything akin to a constitutional, convention of the Patriotic Front. And if it is found that it was not, then it means whatever they have put in place has not worked. Now, for me, we need to address ourselves to the crisis that the failure by the court to determine this matter has resulted in. Just this morning, I got a phone call from Honorable Kapyanga, who has said that the tribunal that was sitting in Mpika to consider the petition on the nomination for the council by-election has found that the ECZ faltered in how it refused the Patriotic Front from participating in the election. Now, this is an offshoot of the fact that the case in court has so delayed, because now another tribunal is beginning to think, wait a minute, this Emmanuel Mwamba camp has not been confirmed or dismissed by the court. The Nakachinda case the national camp, are the ones who are still, according to the owners of the party, considered legitimate leaders. Okay, the change of office bearers was as controversial,
has also been contested.
As controversial as anybody can be, and that matter is before the court. So this tribunal now finds itself lumbered with the responsibility of determining how do we then determine this? Who the legitimate owners of this political parties, and also what standards did ECZ utilize to accept that Mao Sampa's SG is legitimate and dismiss. Now these are the chaos that you create by delaying a case that is so requiring of urgent attention. Our lawyers certify these cases as urgent. For me, we are having a process where public institutions are either being polarized or are deliberately hiring themselves up to a ruling party to be able to decimate one political party without looking at the ramification or the results of the decisions they're going to be making. Look, they may succeed in preventing me from contesting an election. Yeah. But what have they done? They have taken away the right of the people in Lukashya who think that
who should have their own choice.
I don't do this for myself.
No.
I am a member of parliament in Lukashya because people need representation and they're the ones who make a choice. But the structure is such that the platform must be laid out in such a very objective and independent manner that people are not going to be thinking, I was making a comparison that it's like Power Dano wants to play with Nkana Red Devils. But before the date of the game comes, the Nkana coach begins to say, okay, Mlima Power Dano is Emmanuel Mwamba, Chisanga Tababemo, Muwike Maba Zulu, Nababanda. What kind of game are you going to create? Yeah. But look, we are transforming from a respected, emerging democracy in Africa to one that is going to be, vilified genuinely by other Africans.
If previous presidents, including President Lungu, had done what President Hakainde Hichilema has done, would President Hakainde Hichilema have won the 2021 elections?
You would not have made it.
Would we be called the democracy?
That is the time we would have closed the door to a democratic process that we put in place in 1991. But look, these other presidents were not foolish to have allowed a flourishing democracy to have taken place. You see, the UPND, in my assessment, has chosen the path of a de facto one-party state system. They know, look, they can't be contending with Citizens First now. Because they are much bigger political party than Citizens First. The only party they are targeting at decimating is Patriotic Front for the simple reason that they know that if they contended with Patriotic Front as we are currently constituted in 2026, they cannot beat us at the poll. But look, the sad thing is that this compromisation or compromising of state institutions is not only with the courts. It is with every other institution. The ECZ as it is currently. Look at
can't run a free and fair election.
Look at the decisions they are making. About who should sign an adoption certificate. It has never been heard of that the ECZ lays a standard on who in the political party should be the appropriate person to sign.
It's not their role.
Leave it to the Patriotic party itself. Let them make it, because they elect their leaders. They choose their leaders. You see, but also, when the public has been given a clear view of what is happening between State House and Mao Sampa's presidency, the police, the registered societies, Parliament, it is clearly showing that these political parties...
The meeting of minds is criminal.
Yeah, the consonance of how they are thinking is actually a criminal industry. And worse still, they are trying to protect that criminality. You see, between Mrs. Muhende and this new Registrar of Societies, Mrs. Muhende did the right thing. They removed her and put in a person and asked them to do something wrong. And that person did something wrong. If you look at Parliament, the Mao Sampa's so-called retreat is the subject of court proceedings. Under the existing, jurisprudence or even the practice of Parliament, when a matter is before the court, the Speaker does not do anything. In fact, I don't know whether it was now out of shame or out of, fear of being caught napping. When it came to deal with the 9 members of Parliament who were unfortunately so-called expelled from the Patriotic Front, we got a statement, not even from the Speaker, but I think from the clerk of the Parliament, that look, because this case is in court, we can't do anything. So how do you then justify how you accepted that Ingona
the changes
can tell you to change, the leader of opposition. That Ingona can, and before, we had been able to deal with the matter, before we even go back to Parliament, there was another letter saying Honorable Kasando had been removed and replaced, I think, with Honorable Daka.
And you even effect that.
Yeah. And this is after you had yourselves made the comment that the matter involving the 9 MPs is, so you can see that we have reduced politics from a program of national governance to child's play. A Sunday school picnic looks much better than the politics we're doing in this nation. So we need to get to a stage where, like Robin Lufuka said today, we identify men and women of character, men and women of integrity, and entice them to come back to the center stage of politics so that we can drive this country forward. Because look, what we are doing now, we're not even going around the circles. We are actually regressing into a dark hole. Sooner we'll become worse than the colonial government was in this country.
Honorable George Sanga, as we wind up our conversation, what are the prospects for 2024? There seems to be very dim looking at 2023. The economic sector, I think, was floundering. Yes. Social sector, the crisis we have with high cost of living, and our dear brothers appear to be failing in every sector, whether it's agriculture, whatever sector you pick, mining, we are in a crisis. Where do you see us in 2024?
We have already painted a very bad picture, a dark picture for 2024. Because, look, the problem that we have with the UPND is that they're not matching their words with their actions. Whatever they say and what is happening are two different things. They are only in office, these individuals, because of the magnanimity of Zambians. And still, I think the population also is tired. We've been doing too much politics. The UPND put us under so much pressure as a political party that was in government, to an extent where when they were voted into power and were voted out of power, people thought, okay, we've done what we needed to do. Let's give these people individually a chance. But even when they're beginning to fail, Zambians are still scratching their heads. What next? But like I said, we've painted a very bad picture, for the future, for 2024, purely because we've been fettered to so many lies by this political party. Look at how they're dealing with mining, for instance. At one moment, we were told, oh, we've got a deal with KCM. The next moment, we're told, oh, the deal is still oral. We haven't put it in writing. Mopani comes in, they do a deal that clearly shows that they've doubled the price at which they're selling their stake to this investor, to an extent where instead of being given sufficient money for the investor to come into Mopani, it is like, I have half a loaf of bread. Before I give it to you, I even go and collect another half from my neighbor and tell you, no, but then you Mopani you can begin to operate. So I don't even think that these mining companies are going to invest anything in the next, in the next 12 months. It's not going to happen.
What should political parties do? What should Zambians do?
I think Zambians must take control, of their economy. For me, that is what is important. Look, you may have people were trying to laugh at what Edgar Lungu tried to do towards the end of our tenure by taking the mines and putting them under the control of the government. That is a very brave and decisive step that he had taken. In fact, it is what they are pretending to do with Mopani, if you have seen. They are pretending that
we have some sufficient ownership.
We're only giving them...
When it was 100% owned.
Actually, yes. For us, we owned it, all of it. For me, we should have used Mopani as our own baby. Build capacity within Mopani before inviting an investor to come back and invest. You see, they always want to argue that, no, mining investment is very expensive. Why are we the only ones who are arguing like that? Tanzania and the graphite mines, they're only giving investors 49%. Botswana, in their diamond mines, they have now resolved, they're only giving Botswana 49%. In fact, I think they're taking a much bigger stake themselves.
51%, and then they've assumed marketing rights.
Absolutely. If you look at the principle of shared value, which is being employed by Venezuela and Mexico and other Latin American countries, that's a way to go in mining investments. But see, because we've got professionals in privatization, the only thing they know
is how to sell,
is how to hand over to the others. So it paints a very gloomy picture. And if you go to agriculture, it's even a sad tale, because I am a member of parliament, unfortunately,
for a rural constituency.
I have argued this, that rural communities do only depend on the government with one shot. Give them fertilizer, give them seed, walk away. They will produce their food. They will feed themselves.
Food secure.
They'll
have something to sell.
They'll help you. FISIP has lamentably failed. And it is, in my view, it is lack of intelligence. It's lack of wisdom. To see FISIP failing, and then you begin to say, oh, we're going to introduce something called the consolidated agriculture, something, I don't even know what they call this program.
CASIP,
When they begin to describe it, You know, even somebody who's a little
they can't even describe it. They're introducing loans, who's eligible, how the repayment periods will be done. So it's literally they're abandoning the sector.
This all paints a very dark picture of where we're going, you know, forward. But people have even started now asking them, gentlemen, why don't you ask for help from the Patriotic Front? If you heard somebody was on TV saying, why can't Masebo just call, you know,
Dr. Chitalu,
this is, look, managing cholera is supposed to be a 4-week window. Within 4 weeks, you must know.
Shut it down.
The interventions you have done must bring you results. Look at the numbers now.
Yeah.
They are on the increase, even with interventions. But the interventions that we are seeing are not even meaningful in my assessment. What are these interventions? People are now saying that if you throw up and you purge at UTH, they'll take you to cholera. And then they discover that you're not actually a cholera patient.
You might actually pick the cholera from there.
Yes,
but there's no water and the facilities have not been very adequately built.
And ask a very simple question. Sir, people are saying there's no water here.
Yeah.
You saw the answer that he provided.
He said you are black members as opposition and you are witches.
You don't win by doing that thing. For me, the president should now call a stakeholder, you know, a multifaceted stakeholder engagement in fighting against cholera. There are people who are well versed than the president. There are actually people who are well versed than the Minister of Health in fighting cholera. But if all these are going to be ignored, this thing is going to, it's a bombshell. It has not even exploded. Look, we are failing to manage it in the epicenter, which is the headquarters of the nation, which is the capital city of the nation. What will happen if this cholera spreads to Northern Province?
No, by the way, you have cholera outbreak.
In Western Province.
We have COVID outbreak. COVID is
on the upswing as well. Yes.
We have anthrax outbreak.
Yes.
Then we have dysentery also outbreak. You have in agriculture sector, armyworms, and the black beetle.
Yes.
It's like you are reading the Bible about end times.
And brown streak in Northern Province for the cassava.
Yes, and then we have that disease that has affected cassava.
Yes.
You are reading like end times.
End time, yes. But
that's a poor management.
We lack a Joseph.
Yes.
We lack a Joseph. You know,
I agree with
we lack somebody who can think outside the box on how we can be food secure. And in my assessment, in modern leadership, you know, you can even engage with your enemy if you have to find a common solution to a bigger problem. We have a big problem here that nobody should afford to politic. But see, when all people have been turned into disciples of a president. You know, when you write to the town clerk and tell her, look, tell him we would like to help you to fight cholera. Then they write to you and tell you, oh, no. You see, after all, you're not even the Secretary General of the party. It tells you that we don't have a common agenda in solving a common problem. And you know, Dr. Martin Luther King once said we should reason together as brothers or perish together as idiots. At the end of the day, we are going towards a stage where if we don't reason together...
Repeat that.
He says we should reason together as brothers or perish together as idiots.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so
on that note, we end. Should we survive as brothers or perish as idiots?
We need to survive as brothers at all costs, by all means necessary.
Yeah, Honorable George Chisanga, Member of Parliament for Lukashya in Kasama, Member of the Central Committee for the Patriotic Front and Chair of the Legal Committee of the party, and seasoned lawyer, renowned lawyer of many years. This was a great conversation. I thank you, and I thank you for participating in our conversation.
I'm also grateful you gave me an opportunity to excel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Good day. Until we have another guest, see you.
My lawyer.